She was just a hotel janitor, until one night she was caught mopping the ballroom floor and everyone froze. Because the billionaire hosting the event pointed to a painting on the wall, and it was her face. That girl was Eliza Monroe, 22 years old. She had worked the night shift at the Wellington Grand for nearly 3 years. Most guests never noticed her. The ones who did barely spoke to her unless they were asking for towels or snapping at her to stay out of photos. She kept her head down. She was good at that. But the truth was, Eliza had grown up asking too many questions. That was why she had no family left, no last name that truly belonged to her. She had been raised in group homes, shuffled from one house to another until she aged out at 18. The only thing she owned was a folder of papers the state gave her. Birth certificate, hospital file, no photo, no visitors ever listed. She had started working at the Wellington because it was beautiful, not because they paid well. She cleaned the chandeliers that glittered like ice above rich people's heads. She polished marble that whispered old money. Sometimes after her shift, she would sit alone near the empty ballroom and stare at the giant portraits on the wall. Each one was of someone important, founders, investors, even an old jazz singer who had once performed for presidents. One portrait in particular always caught her eye, a young woman with a scar near her right brow, just like Eliza's. But that night, the gala was not supposed to start until after midnight. She had been told the ballroom was closed for prep. She thought the guests were still arriving. So she went in, mop in hand, headphones in ears. She was humming something softly when she noticed everything was too quiet. Then she looked up. 200 guests, gowns and tuxedos. Silence. Her heart stopped. At the far end of the ballroom, under golden lighting, a tall man in a velvet tuxedo slowly stood. He was the host. Everyone knew him. Walter Grayson, billionaire philanthropist, art collector, hotel owner. His eyes were locked on her face. Then slowly, he turned to the painting behind him and back at her. "Eliza," he said, in a whisper not meant for microphones. "It cannot be." Gasps spread through the crowd like wind in leaves. She dropped her mop. "Do you know her?" asked a guest. But Walter Grayson could not answer. He was walking toward her now, stunned, his hands shaking slightly. "Where were you born?" he asked quietly. Eliza took a step back. I do not know." "You do not know?" "I grew up in care. I never met my—" He stopped. His eyes went wide. "That scar! Your eyes!" Now the crowd was murmuring. Cameras were snapping. But Eliza stood frozen. All she could think about was how often she had stared at that painting while polishing the ballroom floor, and how she had always thought it looked familiar. That was the moment her past began to unravel. Because what she did not know, what no one had ever told her, was that the woman in that portrait had vanished 23 years ago, and she had been carrying a newborn baby.
Tasha had always been careful not to be seen, but now, standing in the middle of the ballroom with a dripping mop and every guest's eyes on her, she was center stage. The billionaire had mistaken her for someone else. But why did that portrait on the wall look exactly like her? And why was Walter Grayson, the richest man in the city, trembling like he had seen a ghost? "I need to speak with you," he said quietly, his voice almost pleading. "Please, just for a moment." Tasha looked around. Phones were recording. A woman in diamonds whispered, "Is it her? Is this the girl?" She shook her head slowly. "I think there's a mistake." But Walter Grayson stepped forward and held something out. a necklace. A silver chain with a small, worn charm shaped like a dove. I gave this to my sister before she disappeared. Tasha felt like the floor beneath her was slipping away because she had that exact necklace. Hers had been in a tiny plastic bag in the folder from child services. She had worn it most of her life without knowing where it came from. She reached for the charm in his hand. Her fingers trembled. The same scratched symbol, the same curve. It was a perfect match. The room was so quiet now, even the chandeliers seemed to stop sparkling. Walter looked at her with tears forming in his eyes. My sister's name was Elaine. She vanished the day after our family cut ties with her for choosing the man she loved. He was a worker, a nobody. Our father swore she was dead to him. Tasha's voice cracked. Was she carrying a child? He nodded. She ran away to keep the baby. We never found her, only the pendant she left behind. Tasha backed away. But my records say I was abandoned at a hospital. No name, no contact. Walter turned and pointed at the painting. That portrait was painted the night before she left. She asked to be remembered not as a disgrace, but as the woman she had always been, strong, beautiful, and free. Suddenly, one of the older guests gasped and covered her mouth. I remember her, the woman said. Elaine. She was radiant, but she vanished overnight. We all heard the rumors, but no one ever saw her again. Walter turned to Tasha with eyes full of emotion. If that woman was your mother, then you are my niece. The ballroom erupted. Some guests stood in disbelief. Some clapped. Some just stared. But Tasha could not move. She was still holding her mop. She was still in her uniform. She was still the girl who scrubbed floors. I do not know what to say, she whispered. Walter gently placed the pendant in her hand. You do not need to say anything tonight. Just know this. You are not invisible anymore. You were never nothing. You are family. Tasha wanted to run. Her legs were numb, her mind spinning. But a small part of her, a voice she had buried deep, wanted to believe it was true, that she belonged somewhere, that someone had waited for her. Behind her, a guest stepped forward and handed her a coat. You should not be in that uniform anymore. You are one of us now. But Tasha was not ready to accept it. Not yet. She needed the truth. All of it. Because somewhere out there, her mother had vanished. And if she was going to accept who she truly was, she needed to find out what really happened to Elaine Monroe.
Tasha did not sleep that night. The ballroom lights, the gasps, Walter Grayson's voice calling her family, it all looped in her mind like a dream stitched together with fear. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, still wearing the coat someone had draped over her, staring at the pendant in her hand. The dove, the symbol of her mother, of Elaine Monroe. By morning, Walter had left 10 messages. He wanted to meet again. He said he had more to show her. Tasha hesitated. She was not ready to be anyone's niece, not yet. She needed proof, real answers, and she had only one place to start: the archives. The Wellington Grand had been built nearly a century ago, but in the basement, under the laundry halls, was a forgotten records room. Tasha knew the janitor keys worked everywhere. She had been there once before, accidentally, but this time she went with purpose. Inside, she found a mountain of dusty boxes, ledgers, and guest records. She scanned one by one, hundreds of names, dates, events. Then, in a box labeled 1999 to 2003, she found a guest book with a handwritten entry. Elaine Monroe, checked in December 3rd, 2001, room 812. Next to it,
Paid in cash, no ID. Tasha's heart jumped. She flipped further. 4 days later, another note. Emergency medical assistance requested from room 812. Woman reported fainting. Left before EMTs arrived. Witness, hotel staff William Halden. She wrote the name down. It was a clue, a missing piece. She rushed upstairs, pulled staff records, and found an old file. William Halden. Concierge. Retired. Last known address, Glendale. 2 hours later, Tasha was on a train headed to a quiet suburb Walter's guests had never even heard of. She knocked on the door of a modest blue house. An old man answered, blinking in surprise. "Are you William Halden?"
Yes?
"I think you saw my mother, 23 years ago, room 812. Her name was Elaine Monroe?" The man's face changed. His hand fell to the doorframe. Elaine. She was terrified, pregnant, alone. She came here because she thought no one from the Grayson family would ever find her here. Tasha's eyes filled. She had a baby? Yes. She gave birth in that room. Early. No doctor. Just her and me. She was bleeding, but she made me promise not to call the hospital. She said if the family found out, they would take the child. Tasha's throat tightened. Then what happened? She wrapped the baby in a towel. She kissed her forehead. Then she left me with a note and disappeared into the night. A note? Tasha asked, nearly breathless. William walked slowly into his living room and returned with an envelope, yellowed with age. On it, in faded ink, "For my daughter, if she ever finds me." Tasha opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, in neat, trembling handwriting. "To my child, if you are reading this, then you are alive and strong, and somehow you found me. I had to run because the people I loved chose pride over love. But you are the only choice I made without fear. You are my hope, my heart. I am sorry I left, but I stayed close. I never stopped watching, never stopped praying that one day you would walk through this world not as someone who scrubs floors, but as someone who owns the keys to every door. Love, always. Mom." Tasha broke. The tears came like waves. Everything she had never known was in her hands. Then William added, "She came back once, a year later. She asked me to take her to the portrait in the ballroom. She stood there in silence for 10 minutes, then said, 'Someday she will see this, and she will understand who she is.'" Tasha stared out the window, her heart full of grief and wonder. Her mother had never truly left her. She had hidden her, to protect her. Now it was time to finish what Elaine Monroe started.
The next evening, the Wellington Grand was quiet again. The chandeliers sparkled just as they had before, the ballroom gleamed. But something had changed. Tasha was no longer holding a mop. She stood at the base of the same portrait, the painting of the woman who once vanished, the woman who gave up everything to keep her daughter safe, her mother, Elaine Monroe. Walter Grayson entered slowly, alone this time, without the cameras or guests. He paused when he saw Tasha standing beneath the painting. "You found something," he said softly. Tasha nodded. "I found her." She handed him the letter Elaine had written. His fingers trembled as he read the words. When he looked up, tears rimmed his eyes. "She loved you more than anything. She ran from you, but she never ran from me." Walter exhaled deeply. "Our father was cruel, controlling, I begged her to stay, to fight, but she was afraid. Afraid she would lose you. And she was right. Tasha looked him in the eye. You could have searched harder. I did. I hired investigators for years, but all we ever found was silence. The truth hung between them like heavy fog. I know you did not choose what happened, but now I have a choice. Walter swallowed. And what do you choose? Tasha stepped away from the painting and pulled something from her coat pocket. A ring, her mother's, hidden inside the lining of the pendant. She placed it gently on a small table beneath the painting. I choose to forgive, but I will not be a secret, not your hidden niece, not a name in a file. Walter nodded slowly. Then what will you be? Tasha took a deep breath. I will be a voice. He frowned. A voice? Yes, she said, her voice now clear and unwavering. There are thousands of girls like me, forgotten, abandoned, working jobs that make them invisible. I want to tell their stories. I want to speak the names no one remembers. Walter looked stunned. You want to start something? I already have, Tasha replied. I have begun a channel. It is called Black Voice. For every unheard story, for every person who was told they do not matter. Walter slowly smiled. Then I will fund every episode, and you will not just tell your story, you will change lives. But Tasha shook her head. No, I want to build this myself, with truth, with heart, not money. The silence that followed was powerful. Then Walter nodded with pride, just like your mother. As she turned to leave, the hotel staff watched her, no longer as a cleaner, no longer invisible. Tasha Monroe had found her name, found her voice, and now she would speak for those still living in silence. Because every life is a story, and every story deserves to be told. This was a mystery thriller original story. If this touched your heart, subscribe for more true-to-life emotional journeys. Stories that speak for the forgotten, the unseen, and the brave. New videos every week.